Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Behind Enemy Lines Hockey Podcast. Today, we're going to dive into comparison between Toronto and Montreal in their draft picks, prospects, what they've done in the past, and what we expect is going to be coming in the future. As always, I'm joined by my co-host and buddy Steve. Take her away, Steve.
Well, we're back at it. Good to co-host another episode. And we talked in the last episode of what's not working well for Toronto and what's working well for us. And we mentioned that we can talk about what is working well and do a pretty much a brand or a behind the brains episode of draft picks, the
Mhm.
hometown development, the homegrown stuff. What are we doing differently than the Maple Leafs? So we won't break down every name and game by game number of those players. We could be here for days upon that, but we can summarize sort of the number of picks that we've had, the number of players we drafted, what that number means, and what does it look like moving forward.
Okay. And on that, as always, we have our trivia questions going to be related to the topic today. And seeing as the bulk of our topic is draft, hit
We
us with
we will
today's
keep it
question.
we will keep it draft related. And we're not talking about dodging the draft. We're talking about which Montreal Canadiens drafted player has played the most NHL games, regular season games. And I will tell you, it's not all with Montreal. So, what NHL player has played the most NHL regular season games in his
Okay.
career?
And as usual, we'll do our Mitch Marner report. Right now, with 15 games played, he's got 4 goals, 15 assists. He's a plus 10, which puts him ahead of Austin Matthews in pretty much all of them categories. And he would be fourth on Leafs scoring right now if he was still with the Leafs. And it's funny, I just as a side note, I was talking to a friend of mine I ref hockey with last night who is a die-hard Leafs fan, and he hates the idea that Mitch Marner's gone. Um, and he's cheering for Mitch Marner, and he goes, Sheldon, he goes, I hate to say it, but he's going to win a cup in Vegas. It's going to happen. He goes, the sentiment is growing. People are starting to wake up to the dire straits that Toronto is in.
Yeah, and every game that goes by where one does well on a personal or team level and the other doesn't, it
Mhm.
just magnifies that decision through and through.
Mhm.
And we know the Leafs were backed into a corner. We know that
Mhm.
because salary cap got them there. But that's part and parcel to this episode based on the salary cap is can you find home drafted players that are young that can play in your system
Mhm.
that can be a little bit cheaper and give you production
Mhm.
because that's why the two franchises are going in a different direction.
Yeah. So tonight, at the time of recording this, it's we're a couple hours away from the Montreal Dallas Stars game. Um, so tonight when they play Dallas, they've got very similar records. Dallas is 10-4-3. Montreal is 10-4-2. Um, Casey DeSmith is the confirmed starting goalie. He's got a 273 goals against average, 897 save percentage. Dobash is starting. He's got a 225 goals against average and a 920 save percentage. So they're not really comparable numbers in the goaltending. I believe DeSmith is their what they would consider their backup goalie, anyways. But he's got Montembeau kind of numbers, so I kind of like our chances there. And then if you go into the power play, Montreal's power play is 26.1. Dallas is 29.9, which is a little bit better, but the penalty kill, Montreal's is up to 81.8 now, which I believe last week was around the mid 70s. So they're climbing, they're going in the right direction. Dallas's penalty kill is awful. It's 73.6. So I think that's where the difference maker is going to be for us tonight. If you're Montreal, you want a penalty of Phil DeFair tonight.
Yeah, and we'll just quickly take a step back. We played a terrible game against LA.
Mhm.
We it wasn't that LA did tons of stuff right other than capitalize on our chances.
Mhm.
We just didn't bring an effort. Now, how does that translate into tonight? Dallas is a similar type of team to LA. They're big. They play that gritty, grind them down, wear them out kind of game. And in those kind of games, you got to keep your temperature, internal temperature under control. You can't let your enemy get the better of you. We need to stay out of the penalty box because if we can get them in and us stay out, like your numbers have already pointed, it lends a little bit of a benefit to us. So, we need to play composed and try and draw penalties.
Mhm.
Our transition game does that. So I'm hoping that we come out with a little bit more effort than we did against LA, and we're able to make them take penalties. And the penalties, I'm not talking go in there and call his wife a dirty sob. Keep your feet moving. Try and force them to trip you. Those
Yeah.
are the stupid penalties that no team likes to take, but is a part of this game because the game is so fast paced. So we need to keep the feet moving and really outwork them. They'll take more penalties.
Yeah. Drawing a penalty and taking a penalty are two different things. And drawing penalty, like that old adage, speed kills. Speed kills every time. Montreal's got it to burn. Let's take it and let's use it to our advantage. Another quick note I wanted to mention: Dallas right now is on a 3-game winning streak. Montreal, as we know, lost against LA the other night. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Montreal's lost back-to-back games yet this year, have they?
No, we haven't, and that's going to be the telltale sign. Is how do we rebound?
Mhm.
The proverbial cliche. It's not how many times you get knocked off the horse; it's how many times you get back on.
Mhm.
Tonight is a get back on. We
Yeah.
need to get our groove on. We need to show them that the East isn't a bunch of Smurfs, as the Western Conference likes to call us.
Mhm.
We need to play with an effort that makes them tired of the cycle, the transition, and the stretch pass. And you know we have the ability with facing a backup goalie or a perceived backup goalie. We need to make them regret that decision, and we need to put pucks on net with a purpose and follow them in it. And maybe it's going to be a greasy goal from Galley that we need to get us started, but
Mhm.
we need to do something to turn the tides to create the change in result.
Yeah, and I think Montreal, and I think you'll agree with me, Montreal plays a better game when they use their speed and their transition, and they make the other team chase the game and chase
Yeah,
and struggle to set up. And Montreal uses their speed to that advantage. And I think that's the key tonight is Montreal's speed, being able to draw them penalties, whether the trips, the hooks, the things like that that typically come with a getting outskated game. So again, I would like, you know, they're in a tougher part of the schedule now where they're playing the teams up in the upper echelon where they are. So this is really going to see where Montreal's really at. Are we legit or are we pretenders? We're going to find out in the next few games when the games we got coming up.
yeah, because the last game was a loss and not a good one to LA. We have Dallas tight, and then we have Boston, who is playing out of their
Yeah.
minds on Saturday. So this could be, if we're not careful, 3 losses
Mhm.
because these teams are with us in the standings. So I'm looking for this game to be a gritty overtime kind of feel kind of game. And if we can get them to overtime, we win the game.
It's funny because I was just going to ask you your prediction, and I have it right here in my notes. I'm predicting an OT game for sure. And again, always I see Montreal winning. Anytime Montreal gets into an overtime game, I think we ultimately have the advantage because of our speed and creativity on both ends of the ice, the forwards and the defense. Like Montreal
Agreed.
has the skill. Realistically, they could put out 3 defensemen to play in overtime and not be hampered.
Yeah, and I mean Dallas has got one of those guys as well. Miro Heiskanen is a top notch defenseman. You don't want to give him time and space in overtime. So I hope when this goes live on the YouTube that we're not regretting identifying Heiskanen because he is a guy that could single handedly kill you. So I'm hoping that he's very tired and lethargic tonight. We can hope that he's not on his A game and he's not the deal breaker against us tonight.
Okay, so that's going to take us right into today's topic. We're going to do a comparison of how Montreal and Toronto have drafted over the years, the players they've drafted, the draft picks they've used to get things in trade, and a whole various assets of it. I know previous you sent me. reams and reams of notes on stuff that you had done over the last while about the draft picks. So you're gonna take this and you're gonna jump on this one and go and talk about you've got games played, you've got players, you've got a world of wealth of information for us.
Right. So, we talk about where we are, where we've been, where we're going. How do we get there? The wheels in motion have to start with your draft picks. They're not just things you trade away. You can. The Maple Leafs have done a good job at that. So now that they're in a struggle mode,
Yeah.
they don't have the assets in the closet. It could be slim pickings. And, we'll talk about, like just for example, 2023, the Maple Leafs had 3 picks. 3 picks is all they had. When you trade away, at the trade deadline, a draft pick or 2 draft picks and a prospect to try and get a trade line acquisition that's only there for a rental and it doesn't pay off, you don't win a Stanley Cup. And do the math, 1967 wasn't yesterday.
Yeah. Neither one
Then
of us were alive yet.
yeah, I was still in Baghdad.
Yeah.
So you can't deplete the assets. So let's we can break it down in as far back as 2018. I tried to keep it relevant to guys that would still be impactful and maybe most guys still on a roster. If you go back from 2018 and compare the two teams, we had 77 total draft picks. The Toronto Maple Leafs had 52. So we had really 25 more picks than them. Now, the odd statistic in this is they had 13 total players make the NHL with games played. Maybe not all with Toronto, but talent that got at least one game played in the NHL. Whereas Montreal had significantly more than that. And you do the 19 players, 19 NHL players, caliber players that played over the 77 picks. It's like 24.8%. So those numbers statistically are 25% and 25%.
Mhm.
But the difference is when you draft more players and you keep those assets, the chances you getting better ones are going to be stronger. And that's where the tables turn for Montreal. So we had a total of 2,285 total games played between our draft picks that have made the NHL. The Maple Leafs are 1,183.
Mm.
That's 1,100 different games played for
That's
us.
doubled.
That's astronomical.
Mhm.
So on average, we are getting 30 more games played per drafted player.
Mhm.
So where does that impact us? Well, if you can draft players that stay on your team and become productive, you can then bend your salary cap to be flexible to help you.
Mhm.
So, case in point, Suzuki, Slavkovsky. Suzuki was not drafted by us, but he's with us.
Mhm.
Signed with us, signed a long term with us. Caulfield, Hudson, draft picks of Montreal, all signed 8-year deals at the proverbial $8 million mark. Whereas you look at the Matthews and the Marner, who's not there, Nylander, Tavares, who was not a draft but a free agent, they all signed for way more money.
Mhm.
We get more players on the 48 or $50 million where they're getting 4. We're getting 6 or 7. So your draft eligible players and your draft succession players have got to be there, right? And that trend this is only going back to 2018. This is a 7-year trajectory. So, you take last year, for example. Okay, we had 9 picks, none in the first round because we traded them to get Noah Dobson. The Maple Leafs only had 6 picks. So
Mhm.
we again had 3 more picks in them, which is another third more.
Mhm.
So in a year or 2 years, when that cycle of players is able to start, whether they finish college or they're too old for junior or whatever the case may be, we have extra players that we can put towards development than they do. You go back to 2024, we had 10 picks, they had 8 picks. 2023, we had 9 picks, they had 3 picks. I
Mhm.
mean, these numbers are staggering and they are up and down over an 8 or 10 year period.
Mhm. Well, and I think you mentioned something that made me bring up. I was going to talk about it a little bit later, but I guess it makes sense to bring it up now. You were talking about um, what you do with those picks, right? So it's not only important that you have the picks. I mean, if you don't have the picks, you're really in trouble. And we'll get into that later about the picks that are, from 2026 on up to 2030. Um, but what you do with the picks and who you get, like, I think it's important. A lot of people don't realize you can trade a draft pick, and I'm okay with trading draft picks. But if you're trading a draft pick in essence for a rental player, like, and I'll just say, and this doesn't apply to Montreal, Toronto, it's any team. If you're trading a first round draft pick and you're trading him at the deadline for a rental player that you're not even sure you're going to re sign, you better be sure you're in your Stanley Cup window and you're going to hit that home run, or you're putting yourself in a world of hurt.
And Toronto general managers have done this time and time
Yeah.
again, and we talk about the rebuild. We talked about the Mark Bergevin time where he was not the most well liked general manager that we've ever had,
Mm-hmm.
and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to swing and miss on some draft picks? Absolutely. Are you going to swing and miss on some trades? Absolutely. We can talk about the Nick Suzuki trade. We traded and got Nick Suzuki and Thomas Tatar for Max Pacioretty.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fleecing, and we got a pick in there. That's a
Yeah.
fleecing of a deal. Um, but you got to stay true to knowing that you need to build in a proper rebuild.
Mm-hmm.
The Leafs can't even do that right now
Yeah.
unless they trade away one of their remaining core four players or two of them to
Mm-hmm.
trade assets in either way because they just simply don't have the draft pick, which is an asset. So, we can talk about this. It was, just touch base speculatory that Montreal's kicking tires on Tage Thompson. Again, don't need to get into a big long winded debate, but Toronto can't take him. He's $7 million
Mm-hmm.
for a few more years. And that would work itself out after 1 year, 2 years, because you would have future time to do this.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't have the assets to
Yeah.
trade. Montreal has assets to burn.
Which brings me back to my point. Again, I don't mind, like I said, you had mentioned they traded away those two first round draft picks, which technically one was theirs and one they acquired in a previous trade. So realistically, they're only trading one of their first round picks, but they're getting something back locked up long term. They got Noah Dobson at a very team friendly deal for 8 years,
eight
I
years.
believe. So, I mean, that's two picks that 8 years from now, those two picks may do nothing, but you're guaranteed something. So you're not trading it away for nothing. You're locking in a long term top tier asset, which Hughes and
Right.
Gordon seem to be geniuses. They seem to be masters at that they're not just giving away a pick on a willy nilly. Oh, this guy can help us this week, but what are you going to do for us next week, right?
Right. And we can't lose focus on the why. As to why you do something, right? But it's got to make sense in the short term and the long term. And everybody wants to win. And sometimes, Eminem says, you got to seize your opportunity. You got to do that at some point. But I don't think most of the people running, and I hate to pick on the Canadian school system, but the teachers, involved with the Maple Leafs, they can't spell opportunity because they're getting it wrong. If they spell it, they definitely don't know what it means.
Mhm.
So, Hugo seems to have a plan. We've stockpiled picks, we've hoarded them, we've traded them when it makes sense.
Mhm.
But if you want to go back to in the last 3 years, Toronto has made 17 picks. One player has played in the NHL. One player in the
That's
last three
terrible.
years, and that's Easton Cowan,
Yeah.
and he was just sent down.
Yeah.
Right?
From
If
Boston just
you,
sent him down?
yeah, or
Yeah.
no, Easton Cowan, he's Toronto, right? He was sent back.
Oh,
He
yeah, I'm
played
thinking
this
of
year,
Minton.
and
Sorry.
and he went back.
Yeah.
Now, who's our one player?
Mhm.
Because we've only got one too. Demidov.
Mhm.
He's already played almost double the games,
Yeah.
and with a greater impact. So, do we make a better selection? Maybe. So you go back the previous year, go back another year, 2022.
Mhm.
Toronto's three picks: Minton, 42 games, mostly with Boston. Hildeby, who's if you include the game the other night, these stats are one game behind. He's got 9 or 10 games, and Grebenkin, who's played 18 games. Well, who do we draft in 2022? Some kid named Slavkovsky,
Mhm.
another one named Beck, and some Smurf named Hudson.
Yeah.
Hudson's 100 games, Slavkovsky's 200 plus games.
Mhm.
So they're playing the lion's share of games. You have to go back to 2021 for Matthew Nyes to be the last prominent guy who's hit 100 games for the Maple Leafs.
Yeah.
That simply isn't good enough,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you're giving away a window of getting full value at the million or the 1.3 million, whatever the super rookies get at that point. You're giving that away in your cap space because you've got to pay your core four or core
Mm-hmm.
five. And we seem to do a much, much better job of making sure A, we keep our picks, B, we utilize them, and C, we develop them so they produce for us. And some of those picks may not be Montreal Canadiens forever, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Because if that nets you another asset somewhere down the road, at least it's a productive trade, not a bashful, wishful thinking kind of trade where
Mm-hmm.
you put your tail between your legs after it's done and say, well, shouldn't have done that one again.
Yeah, so you have again, so this gonna lead me to I'm gonna let you put on your analytical speculation hat here now. If you look at over, I believe we're going back as far as 2018. I think you said earlier is where your numbers are derived from. I believe at the time Bergevin was GM still. Trevor Timmons
Yep.
was the head of scouting. Of course, we know now. Hugo's in town, and we got a whole new set of guys in line. Martin Lapointe is a director, and Nick Bobroff. I just think he's genius. I don't know where he comes up with these players, but he can find, a golden nugget in a pile of shit. You know what I mean? And he comes up with it. So what is it that makes it so different? Like where are other teams, and in particular Toronto, where are they going so wrong? How are they getting there? Is it simply they are hiring guys that, for lack of a better term, don't know what they're doing as far as hockey and scouting goes? Or is it
Well,
partially luck? I don't know what the answer
I
is.
mean, there's always luck when you're talking about the talents or future talents, uh, projections, and where they're going to play or who they're going to play with when these kids are 18 years old and you're drafting them.
Hmm.
I've been fortunate in my time. I've gone to 3 NHL drafts.
Hmm.
Um, I had a buddy, a shout out to Brian Hutchinson, his family, Carol and Wayne, mom and dad, billeted generals for years. Former Hab Jeff Hackett uh, was an Oshawa general, stayed at his house when he was drafted by San Jose. I went to the draft in 1993, the year that Jason Arnott played for the Generals and was subsequently drafted by the Oilers at seventh overall. And because he was a high prospect, we got, Arnott was represented by Donnie Meehan, super agent, and we got tickets like four rows off the floor.
Hmm.
We were sitting with, Chris Gratton, Chris Pronger, Todd Bertuzzi's families. We were all in the same section because they were all first round draft picks. And, we were sitting right next to the off ice, the hallway in Quebec City at the Colisée where the players would go down the tunnel. And that's where everybody went to the media room. So I'm sitting right next to the wall. The Montreal Canadiens come to the draft floor and they announce from Turku, Finland, Saku Koivu. And Brian Wayne and I just went, who the fuck is that? Now, obviously, and tonight I'm wearing my Hockey Fights Cancer hat. That guy Saku was
Hmm.
was a monumental part. I mean, he's got tied for the record for most years
Yeah.
captaining our franchise. Just because I didn't know doesn't mean that the scouting staff didn't know. But there's many busts in that process as
Yeah.
well. We drafted Doug Wickenheiser.
Hmm.
And there's not any general manager that if they could have a do-over would say, I'd still take Doug Wickenheiser first.
Yeah.
So you do get it wrong.
Yeah.
Um, but that's your first round, you got to get it right because nowadays with 32 teams, if you only draft in your spot, you're 32 players in between, and a lot could happen in 32 picks.
Yeah. And the
We drafted
the
Lane Hud.
chances are that your next pick or idea pick isn't going to be there when you get back up to the podium.
Right. I mean, we drafted Hudson
Mhm.
in the second round, and he was our second pick in the second round, 62nd overall.
Yeah.
Calder Trophy winner, 62nd.
Hmm.
There's got to be 30 NHL general managers because most of them would have had a pick in the first or multiple and in the second
Hmm.
that did not take Lane Hudson.
Yeah.
So, did 31 general managers get it wrong and we were the only ones to get it right? Possibly. But we saw something in that kid that said we should take him now,
Mm.
not wait till later.
Yeah.
So you're right. Going back to it, there is a little bit of a crapshoot, but you have to still identify it and be willing to take the risk
Yeah.
and saying this is our guy. He fits our system.
Yeah. And I think that's what Montreal does better realistically than anybody else right now. I mean, Anaheim's doing pretty good. They seem to be doing good in the draft as well. But I mean, you got players like you look at like the obvious, the Celebrinis, stuff like that. I mean, uh, they're obvious picks. I mean, you'd have to be a mental moron to not take
Yeah,
these
that
certain
guy's not
players, right?
going
But
200
when you're
pick. That guy's
starting to
not
get
going.
it, yeah, when you're starting to get into the second round, later in the second round, and into the third round, that's where you really find the gems, the ones that, um, you know, a little bit of luck, a little bit of, you see something in the player that, tweaks an interest. I mean, Gallagher, I think Gallagher was picked sixth round, was he not? Something like that?
He was 150th in that neighborhood.
Uh-huh.
Uh, Believe it or not, we have a guy in our roster right now that was a fifth round draft pick in 2020, 136th overall.
Mhm.
Um, that was Jacob Dobish.
Yeah.
So how does that kid fall that far down the line? Well, he's a European. Just because he's European doesn't mean he's not any good. He's from Czechia. He has, in the last 2 years, put himself into a position where he is now being talked about as a Olympic goaltender for Czechia. He played college hockey in the U.S. at the Ohio State University.
Mhm.
So he went to a prominent school, media coverage. How do 31 teams bypass him?
Mhm.
It's simple. They might not have needed goalies in their system at that time, or didn't have room if they did draft him to put him somewhere productive. So sometimes it is by position. It's you're a bear trap trying to get unlocked. Sometimes you just got to go and roll the dice. I mean,
Mhm.
you're only allowed 50 pro contracts. If you eat drafted players and you try to keep them, at some point you're letting them go after their 2 or 3 year window and they're moving on to other teams, or they go over to Europe, or they just quit hockey.
Yeah, and for nothing. And that brings up a point of another, future episode we got coming up. You know, you and I I mean, not just since we started this podcast, but for years, you and I have talked about uh 23 roster spots, 50 contracts, that's your limit. You don't have room for all these guys at some point, and Montreal's starting to get into that window now where we're going to have to start to eat a little bit of pain where maybe we have to trade away, you know, maybe we have to trade away somebody's favorite player to get that 2C that we need, or to get, we're going to have to make a decision it might hurt a little bit at the beginning, but in the long run, it'll be good because as well as we've done with the draft that you've laid out over the last 6 years or 7 years, that we're not going to keep all these players. There's not spots for them all, and we can't waste them either.
Right. And you and I talked briefly today, on my drive home from work on my 8 minute commute, about Tage Thompson being available, and we jokingly said, "What would you give up for him?"
Mm.
And in a Facebook group that I won't name, someone said, "Well, we should trade him for Owen Beck and like 2 draft picks."
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, and we're going to trade Joshua Waugh for Connor McDavid in the
Yeah.
same breath.
Yeah.
NHL general managers aren't that dumb.
Yeah.
None of them are named Gord Stellick, who was in Toronto as a general manager, or John Ferguson Jr., because they've had some dandies,
Mhm.
which the tradition continues. We know that one. But in order to make a deal, you got to make a hockey deal at some point. Now, people, 38 subscribers, don't lose your hats over this.
Mhm.
But would a deal like a Uri Slavkovsky straight up for Tage Thompson get a deal done?
Mhm.
Probably not, because one is an up and coming and one is already productive.
Mhm.
We've had 4 years where Thompson scored 35 plus goals,
Mhm.
and a couple of years in the 40s. That guy isn't going to be cheap. Do you give an Owen Beck, a guy who might not have a spot because Anderson and Galley and Jake Evans are already there? So do you have to let him go? Do you have to give 2 guys and a second pick or a third round pick
Mhm.
in order to really sweeten the pot? Because we have to make room. But if you trade 2 guys off your roster and you bring Tage Thompson in, then you have the ability to promote like a Florian Jack guy, for example.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily addition by subtraction. you're just moving Lego pieces around at that point, not puzzle pieces, Lego pieces,
Yeah.
because
And
they're all building your franchise.
I don't want to really dive too deep into this one right now because I think this is a great topic for another episode where we can, elaborate more on what you've highlighted or touched on there. But I think the key thing there is, 2-for-1 deals right now, although somebody might say it's an overpay, benefits Montreal for two reasons. One, you're upgrading one position significantly off of the back of two other players, but now you're opening space for these prospects that we've talked about that they need to play somewhere at some point or you're going to lose them for nothing. So you got to give them a chance at some point.
Right. So if Beck doesn't fit your prototypical player or he doesn't fit in your lineup today, could he fit in somebody else's tomorrow? Because then we have Hage and Swarovski coming in. And if they don't make Montreal year one, they got to play in Laval. You
Mm.
still have to have room. So
50 spots. That's
those,
it. Yeah.
yeah, 50 spots. And we talked about we talked about this in the last 3 years. We've drafted 28 players in 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Where did 28 players play when those rosters are already full? Some of those players just get let go, some of them get packaged up.
Mm-hmm.
So we're in a good spot because those number of draft picks can be used adequately and productively. And I like to think that our scouting staff and our management staff are doing one heck of a bang up job making sure they identify what is our need. Can we acquire it to play now? Because let's be honest, if Matthew Schaefer was available when we were drafting at 16, we wouldn't have traded to get Dobson. We would have had the kid,
Mm-hmm.
but you couldn't get the kid. So now you got to get the next best thing, and that's a player off a team. And clearly, the Islanders were looking to move Dobson because they knew Schaefer was coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So they took it upon themselves to upgrade, and it cost us Heineman. But again, you can't keep Heineman, and if you do, you probably don't have Kapanen playing. So you see the domino effect that triggers decision after decision after decision,
Yeah.
right? And as much as we like that, we can't keep them all, people. We just don't have room.
Yeah. And again, victim of numbers that we've talked about over the years over the last few episodes. It's a good problem to have in Montreal when you've got more quality players than spots that you can put them. And this is where we talk about if you can trade two or three of them quality spots or players to really improve, i.e., a Tage Thompson, that sets you up for a longer term run at things.
Right,
Um,
right. And I'll just throw out a couple more draft related numbers. So since 2018, the player that has played the most NHL games drafted between Toronto and Montreal is Jesperi Kotkaniemi. Now
mhm.
we know he's playing the lion's share of games in Carolina, but he's up to 489 games played.
How many
That's
games?
the most.
Four? Didn't he do that? Remember?
400, yeah,
Four.
four. Yeah, remember that, Leaf fans? Four. Yeah, good one. Now where does that rank? Well, in that same draft, we drafted Romanov, which then was traded away in a deal to get us Kirby Doc.
Yeah.
Romanov's 365 NHL games. That's the most of any two players between the two franchises. Rasmus Sandin, who is not with Toronto, is at 319 games. And then there's one other player that's topped the 300 game mark, and he has, in fact, played all 300 well, it's now 303 games since I ran these numbers, but he's now played 303 games for the Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah.
And we know that guy is Cole Caulfield.
Mhm.
So, yeah, you're going to keep some and you want to keep the good ones, and you're going to lose some, you want to lose the bad ones, but you've still got to recognize talent and draft. I think we have a better European system than the Leafs do at finding European players, because it seems to be that the recent run of young guys that are playing for us are European.
Mhm.
So, you
Well,
take your take your
that leads to my point about Bobrov being he is um, Montreal's basically European. He's the head of the Europe Russia, and that's where he's finding all these guys. Like he's very well connected over there. He has good relationships with all the teams and all the coaches, and I think he gets a lot of that insider information, I guess you would say, and it really benefits when you see these players that are coming, like Swarovski. Who's seen that kid coming out of anywhere, and he's tearing it up over there in the KHL now, right? Like
and
so,
he was
he's
the second round pick.
yeah. Again,
Second round pick.
30 GMs are doing the mule kick to themselves in the arse end because
Yeah,
they
because
didn't.
they're saying if he turns out like Demidov, what have we not done?
Yeah.
Right? Like, but GMs get it wrong. And again, Bergevin and his crew got some of them wrong too. I mean, uh, he's now in Nashville, but Michael McCarron was a Montreal draft pick at one point in the first round. No, he had no business being a first round pick, but we went with a guy based on size that we thought was going to help us because he had a great junior career. Came out of the U.S. National Development Program, played with the London Knights, and then with the Oshawa Generals, and just never found his groove to be a first line player,
Hmm.
especially being a first round pick. But that's okay because you do get the Brendan Gallagher's at 150. So
Yeah.
you can't say, well, we drafted bums, but this guy was lucky.
Yeah.
You're lucky and unlucky at the same time.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important people understand that, you know, every team is allotted 7 draft picks each year, one for each round, right?
Yep.
What you do with them, whether you trade it, whether you keep it, whether you acquire more, you're probably going to, as a GM, you're probably going to miss more times than you hit. The problem
Well,
is when you make that glaring miss, then it outshines. You could do the greatest thing ever, but when you make that glaring, sometimes everybody remembers the negative, not the good, right? So it's a two-edged sword.
yeah, and that goes back to the numbers we talked about. Toronto's had less picks and got 25%. We've had more picks and had 25%. But
Mhm.
when you break that down, the 2,285 games by the 19 players,
Mhm.
our 19 prospects averaging are 120
Mhm.
games played per player. When you do Toronto's picks, they're only averaging 91 games. So we're getting 30 more games per drafted player. Those are huge. That's huge because
Mhm.
that's a half a season more per player,
Yeah.
and we get more of them there.
But if you also look at it, you were talking about the 25% mark. You could also look at it the other way that Montreal's draft picks or players that Montreal has drafted, whether they played with Montreal and moved on to the other teams, are we're at twice the amount of games played
Yes.
as Toronto, right? Which is to
Yeah.
me, that's a glaring number. That's one of those that's a like how do you mess it up that bad? That you know,
Well, when you mess it up that bad, you're doing what the Leafs have done. And since 2018, the Leafs have had no first round draft picks in 3 drafts
mhm.
because they've traded them in other trades,
Okay,
right? We had 1 year of no first round draft picks, but we traded 2 of them to get Noah Dobson.
which is listen, that's like drafting.
That's like
Look
drafting a
at it
first
this
round
way.
player.
That's drafting, that's using a first round pick to draft an NHL ready player and go. So that's why I
Yeah.
say, depending on what you get for it, is what makes it
Yeah.
worthwhile. If you're getting somebody you can plug in your roster right away, boom, you go, it's worth the trade. But if you're trading that draft pick for a future or somebody that you know is only going to be here, till the end of the season and your Stanley Cup run is over, that you might as well just take that money, burn it, and throw it in the garbage, as far as I'm
Yeah.
concerned.
Yeah. And we're doing a better job. So
Yeah.
so you talked about earlier what's coming up for us.
Hmm. So, do you want anything? Do you want to conclude anything as far as what we've already done? Do you got any final thoughts on that before we move on to the future?
The only thing is again, it's a crapshoot. You have wins and losses. We seem to have more wins. Our more wins are because our players are creating an impact. And moving forward, in order to be able to have the big win, if you don't finish dead last or you don't win the lottery, forget finishing dead last because it's a lottery now. If you don't finish in the bottom 5 and get a Matthew Schaefer, get lucky to get a Matthew Schaefer, you have to hope that the guys you draft are more Demidovs
Yeah.
than not Demidovs
Mhm.
because that's where you're going to win. Your win has to be that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to what's coming up. So from the 2020, we're just going to go quickly from the 2026 draft to the 2030 draft. Um, so right now, Montreal 2026 draft has one first round pick, two second round picks, a third, two fourths, a sixth, and a seventh. So they don't have their fifth pick. Comparing, Toronto has a third, a fifth, and a sixth, which is not a lot. I mean, a hit and a miss. Those guys probably will never see an NHL game.
unless
You
they
know,
buy a ticket.
yeah, unless they buy a ticket. 2027, Montreal has all their picks. First, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth and seventh. Toronto has second, fourth, fifth. They've got two sixths, and a seventh. So they don't have a first round pick for the next 2 years. But then both teams up into 2030 then have all of their picks, um, all seven of their picks. So, I mean, it's not as bleak 2 or 3 year down the road from Toronto. Um, but in the next 2 years, Toronto's in some rough shape. Like they're, as we know, they're in a world of hurt right now, and they don't have anything in the next 2 years coming that they can do to fix it without trading, too far into the future. And I'm not sure of the rule, but I don't believe you can trade picks. Like I don't think you can trade a first round pick 5 years from now. I think you've got a
Yeah,
little window.
they've limited us to how far out you can trade picks. So in the next year or two, some of those picks are going to be traded because we already know 2026 and 2027 Leaf draft picks are traded. So I'm imagining picks will be traded in 28 and 29, maybe not 30, but they're coming.
Yeah. So that's what they've got coming up as far as picks go. I just want to touch real quickly on the actual draft. 2026, again, I'm by no means, I'm not a scout by any means, and I'm not a guy that follows, all these players. But unanimously, everybody that I've watched as far as a podcast, whether it be Marco D'Amico on the Star D'Amico podcast, whether it be you know Tony Marinaro, he gets all his guys on there, and even on ESPN. So they all say the 2026 draft class is going to be the deepest, strongest draft class in decades, obviously highlighted by Gavin McKenna. Um, I think it's no secret he's going to go first, whether that be Calgary, whoever finishes and gets the pick. I mean, they should be putting their rocket skates on and running to the podium to get him.
And
2020,
acquiring picks. They should be stripping down everything they have
yeah,
and trading to get as many first round picks from other teams to
yeah,
be able to get in there.
yeah. And you see that actually affecting now a lot of trades. A lot of teams are not trading away their first pick because they know that I mean, how much of a donkey would you feel, you know, and I'm just going to throw out a name. Calgary with their first round draft pick acquired from selects Gavin McKenna.
Yeah,
That GM's getting fired.
yeah. And I mean, again, it's going to happen, right? You
Yeah,
don't win them all, but
yeah. Yeah, so
you
I,
know,
I think I think with the depth of the draft coming up next year, 2027 apparently it is pretty good. It's not as deep, obviously, as 2026. Landon DuPont, defenseman, with Everett Silvertips out of the WHL, is supposed to be another one of these lock studs that are up and coming. But the first 10 in 2027 apparently is supposed to be pretty solid. I'm hearing again, I don't know, I only go here by what other people say, but apparently in 2026, the full first round is filled with potential studs. That's what I'm hearing.
well, we can only hope that we still have our picks, or if we've traded him away for something, we have a Tage Thompson that's lining up with us and is ready to
Hmm.
take the world by fire and create some noise.
Hmm. Um, so if you want to, we'll just take a little quick sidestep here. In the 2026 draft, I mean, I know it's early in the season, and again, we've shouted out that disclaimer many times. But as it stands right now, Montreal would be picking in the 25 to 32 range. It would be nice to pick 32nd. Um, so if you take a quick look on the board here right now, oh my God, I'm not, you got a Kaikkonen, Velo Kaikkonen at 25. You got Axel Ellefson at 26. Joe Aginla at 27. Nicholas Aram Olsen, Brett Olson, Noah Kosick, who we got Zachary Nyman at 32, defenseman. So I mean, I just wanted to throw those names out for, if you want to take a look at them and dive deeper into, what could be a potential Montreal draft pick in 2026. I just wanted to,
Right.
that's the names we kind of got to be familiar with. And then, of course, there's always going to be that random off the board pick that nobody's seen coming,
Right. And
which,
we could end up making a trade with somebody else and getting another pick back, and that pick is somebody else's, and
Mhm,
they're not as fortunate to be as high up in the standings. So there's a chance, like we had a 16 and 17 pick, we acquire something. So
mhm.
you never know. A lot could happen early days.
Just throwing it out for food for
Yeah.
thought, some names to
Now,
maybe watch for if you're the in-depth Habs fan who likes to, really dive deep into the stuff. I know you do. I know you're like really getting into the meat and potatoes of it. It's just some names thrown out there to think about. And as
so
far as
so go
sorry,
ahead. Go
as
ahead.
far as the draft goes and where we're headed, what are your final thoughts on the whole subject?
Well, again, I like what Hugo is doing in acquiring picks. We have 10.
Mhm.
I don't foresee us drafting all 10 because if we don't make a trade at the trade deadline or sooner and put draft picks in, I see it being another draft day kind of thing where we package up a player at the end of the year
That's
and a draft
exciting.
pick
That's exciting.
to, so we and they've done it at multiple drafts. So
Yeah.
I don't see us drafting all 10 players.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't see
Just
it either. No, especially when we're trying to get to that window we're in now, right?
right, right. And those draft picks become valuable to
Mhm,
gain other assets.
mhm,
So now before we jump into trivia, I want to throw a couple other draft notable things, facts,
mhm,
fun facts. 1984, we drafted a guy by the name of Troy Crosby, 240th overall.
mhm, mhm.
Why should that name ring a bell? That's Sid the Kid's daddy.
Yeah.
So he was drafted by Montreal, clearly never made an impact with us. Uh, we drafted another goalie in the ninth round who went on to play 581 games. So we're talking about odd draft statistics. Euro Halak,
Mhm,
great NHL career, drafted in the ninth round. So you do get diamonds in the rough.
mhm,
And then I'll give you one more draft fact. 1992, the 260th overall pick, we drafted Hiroyuki Miyara from the Japanese national team. So we went talking about off the board picks. We went Japanese in 1992. So the last little draft fact is we play the Dallas Stars tonight. So believe it or not, Casey DeSmith was a Montreal Canadian briefly,
mhm,
and we traded him to Vancouver for Tanner Pearson and a 2025 draft pick.
mhm.
That was a third round pick, a Vancouver pick. We packaged that pick up elsewhere in a trade, and that pick ended up not even being drafted by us. So when we talk about picks and how they're important, we used a player that we didn't play for us, traded him, got a player that did play for us, and a pick, parlayed that pick into something else. So
Mhm,
draft picks are kind of a funky animal,
mhm.
and sometimes you just got to use them for what you are. But
Yeah.
Casey DeSmith was a Montreal Canadian, never played, but he was property of us at one point.
Yeah.
Tonight's opposing goalie.
Okay. Final thoughts on the whole thing. I just have a couple quick final thoughts about the draft part of it. It's no secret, and I don't think it's any weird new science. You have to build through the draft. Any successful team who has been successful, done it long term, and maintained, it's been homegrown, built through the draft. You don't win by, you know, buying teams, I guess you would say, especially now since the salary cap era. It's pretty hard. And you see examples of that all over the league. Um, and again, I just want to reiterate what I said before. I think if you use your picks for longer term uh, comeback, things that come back that you have longer term control over, you're just more successful as opposed to trading it away for something that you're only going to have a month, maybe two out of. That's all. I think that's the two most important things when it comes to drafting and prospects.
Yeah, and again, you got to use your assets wisely, and we seem to be doing a much better job than the other guys.
Yeah. Okay. On that note, trivia.
So we'll go back to repeat the question one more time. What Montreal Canadiens drafted player has played the most NHL regular season games? This player was drafted in 1981 by the Montreal Canadiens, went on to play a grand total of 1,651 games. Now, mind you, these statistics go back as far as the draft does in 1963. So we're talking a lot of years. The answer, Chris Chelios.
Mhm. Old man
So
Chris.
played a lot of games with us, but as we know, he cycled through Detroit and Chicago and Atlanta, and I mean, he just seemed to, the ageless wonder. Him and Yarmo Yager's dads maybe got together and shared a lovely night with a lady, and they got the longevity genes or something. Who
Yeah,
knows?
yeah. Because he played I think he played 10 years in the American Hockey League after. I don't know if it was that long, but it seems like he played 10
He
years.
I think he was 51 or something like that
Yeah,
when he was still playing. So,
yeah.
but he started off a Hab,
He was in the
1981.
old Reggie Dunlop.
Yeah, yeah. Him and Ogie Ogletorp got
Yeah,
together
yeah.
at a bar, and the rest is history.
Yeah. Okay. On that note, we're gonna conclude tonight's episode. I think it was a lot of great discussion. As always, Steve has lots of good insight. So I want to thank everybody for watching, tuning in. Remember, hit the subscribe button. I think we're pushing the 40 mark of subscribers now. So keep at it. We appreciate all of you. And like I said, comment, let us know what you want to hear. Let us know, if you got any questions from us. We're only more than happy to help you out and reach out to you. So again, let's keep it going. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Yeah, we appreciate the likes, comments, and shares. We can't do it without you. We do it for you, but we can't do it without you. So we'll get a go Habs go for tonight. And like always, keep your stick on the ice.